Just to let you know that we're not expecting a fire alarm tonight, so should you hear the alarm go, please make your way to the car park at the top of the steps. So, apologies, please, Jackie.
Mr. Chair, apologies tonight from Councillors Mike Ratcliffe and Colin Swindle, and attending as substitute is Councillor Irene Ratcliffe.
Thank you. I believe we've got one public speaker, Councillor Twigg. Is that correct? No?
Yes, it is. Yes. That's correct.
Thank you. Councillor Twigg, you've got 3 minutes to speak if you'd like to come and take your position. I've got one on my desk.
I thought you'd start the meeting before I start, or am I straight in?
You're straight in. I'm going to let you know when you've got 30 seconds left. Is that okay?
Yes, you didn't answer my question.
You're straight in.
So you're not starting the meeting and then having the meeting?
No, we take the meeting started, we take public participation. Well, okay, Judith. The
Councillor Twigg.
Councillor Twigg. Thank you. Your 3 minutes is starting now.
Thank you. First of all, Madam Chairman and the committee, thank you very much for allowing me to speak. Tinters Yard at Matlock seems a very good place and a good solution for the travellers. What happens after March, after reading the report? Bakewell has tolerated them for 7 months this year, yet Ashbourne has had them a few weeks. And as you are, as a council, prepared to move them, if they will move, to Matlock Bath. Yet, at Bakewell, you never made any real effort until you knew the Bakewell Horticultural and Agricultural Society would pay half to help them be removed. It concerns me because if it is Ashbourne, you are prepared to help them move quickly, but not Bakewell. Both towns are in Derbyshire Dales. I am aware you have a duty of care towards these travellers. I would like to know why they do not travel, because travellers should travel. You seem to want to stay, they seem to want to stay on certain sites. We do not want them at all in Bakewell anymore. The Peak Park imposed conditions on the showground when the ABC was built and put in conditions no overnight parking and the gate to closed at 10 o'clock. No one enforced this. In fact, the Peak District National Park washed their hands of this. Please find them a permanent site as soon as possible. The elderly residents near the riverside will be pleased if this happens. They were cross about the loud noise, the rubbish thrown in the river. We must not have a repeat of this happening again. In the report, it states 56 days for being homeless, but the travellers have vans to live in, so they're not really homeless at all. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Twigg. Do any members have any interests?
No, I haven't got any interest. I'm putting my hand up for asking a question.
We're not there yet, Councillor Ford. Do any members have any interests? Councillor Ratcliffe.
Well, I am a Derbyshire County Council person in terms of the ward. It's in my ward, but I'm here. Sorry. I'm sorry. I'm a county councillor, and it is in my electoral division that this is, and I think that it's very important to be open. It's not a personal, it's not prejudicial. It's just the fact that I am here as a sub on behalf of Derbyshire Dales. But I do have an interest as a county council. Thank you. And the other one is that I'm a member of the Matlock Bath, only a member, I'm not on the board, a member of Matlock Bath Development Association.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to ask Mr Wilson to introduce the item, please.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Well, this report updates members of the committee in respect of a Gypsy and Traveller family who have presented themselves as homeless to the District Council, and it does seek to determine an appropriate course of action in order to discharge the Council's statutory homeless duties. The report is effectively in two parts. The first part does outline the duties the council has to adhere with in the context of the Homelessness Reduction Act. And the second part deals with a recommendation, which is that the council discharge that duty by the identification of a temporary tolerated site. And the recommendation is that that temporary tolerated site should be at land known as Tintage Yard off the station car park in Matlock Bath. In terms of the proceedings this evening, members will have also received 2 sets of late representations, which does summarise representations received since the report was published. And also I'd like to draw members' attention to the fact that there will be a revised recommendation circulated to you. That revised recommendation deals with the situation in the event that the council is not able to formally secure the land at Tintage Yard. We have received landowner agreement verbally, but clearly there is a process to go through to secure that formally, and the revised recommendation deals with any situation whereby that isn't capable of being achieved, and that will then identify the station coach park at Matlock Bath as the tolerated site in those particular set of circumstances. Happy to take questions, Chairman, alongside other officers who are represented this evening.
Thank you.
Point of order, can we have the resolution? Because we don't even know what we're talking about.
We'll hand that out, and I'll just give you a couple of minutes to read the additional representations, if that's okay.
Madam Chairman, could you ask them to switch the microphones on when we speak, and then we can hear what has been said? That's the order.
So you've got the amended recommendations, and you've hopefully had a look at the additional information. So, Councillor Rose.
Can I just interrupt, please?
Sorry, Councillor Pauly.
I'd like to call for this.
Sorry, Councillor Pauly, would you accept that I'm the chair of the meeting? And would you
I would
please...
accept. Can I just ask, though, please, as this number 3 is an addition that we haven't had a sight of prior to the meeting that we've just had prior to this meeting, I think it would be reasonable to say that this should be deferred so that I can at least ask the other ward member to have some say on it.
I'm going to continue with the meeting. Thank you. Councillor Rose.
I don't think that the change is that substantial, and that Mrs. Corley wasn't actually aware of it, so I understand where she's coming from. Look, members, how many times have we sat in this chamber and debated this subject? We know we have a duty to resolve it. Indeed, at one stage, members will recall, we actually did identify a permanent site at Watery Lane in Ashbourne, and we faced quite a barrage of criticism as a result. In addition, that site got planning consent, and we did have a provisional agreement with the County Council that that could be leased to us. So, you know, we were on the road at that stage to a solution. But then, of course, there was a change in control at the County Council, and the Ashbourne bypass proposal came more into prominence than it hitherto had for many years. And as a result of that, you know, that sort of cooperation was withdrawn for understandable reasons. So I'm not criticising the County Council in any shape or form. It's only right that they should pursue something that should have been pursued many years ago. But moving on, we've been round several houses, have we not? We've been to Roseley, we've been to Bakewell, we've been to Ashbourne and Doveridge, and you know, I could list a whole list of sites which we've discussed, including the one that Mr. Hewitt favours down at Holmesford, which has been rejected on by not only the travelling family but by the planning inspectorate, to name but two people involved in that situation. So this is not easy for the council. It never has been. We are between a rock and a hard place, and at the moment they're on Fish Pond Meadow in Ashbourne, and I had a look there on Saturday afternoon when it was absolutely coming down like dogs and cats in rain, and the whole place was a mire. Now, I know Mrs. Bourne might well suggest, I'm anticipating that she will suggest that, that Fish Pond Meadow is a better site than the site we're proposing at the rear of Matlock Bar Station car park, Tinter's Yard. I don't think so. One's mud and one's a hard surface which is capable of being improved without much costs. To actually deal with the Fish Pond Meadow situation, you'd have to spend a lot of money making it a proper car park, as we intend to do in the future at some stage when funds are available. So it's not a nice place. It's very prominent, and I think it is causing a number of problems. So I think there is going to be a debate. We're not stifling questions in any shape or form. Clearly members have great concerns, and I fully understand the position of a ward member. Because we all know if whoever the ward members or member involved in a situation like this, understandably they're going to receive a lot of emails and comments from their constituents. I've had the privilege of receiving most of those directly as leader of the council. Some are quite nice and some are not very nice, I have to say. It is a pity that this sort of situation does seem to bring out the worst in some people, but there are tolerable people out there, and this council has that level playing field. We've got to do what we need to do fairly, and I think on this occasion the right course of action is to move the recommendations as amended and to take the situation on till March 2019 when the matter will be reviewed. Hopefully we will have had some advice on a permanent site again, which might help us resolve the problem, but members, don't be under any illusion that's going to be an easy process, because whatever site is found by the private agents we are about to appoint will be controversial. Doesn't matter where it is, it will be controversial, and it will need planning consent. That will be controversial. So that's two rounds that we've yet to face, but we're determined to find a permanent site. We have to find a permanent site because that's the only solution to this issue, and I hope members will therefore agree to this recommendation given the circumstances.
Thank you, Councillor Rose. Councillor Pawley. Oh, do I have a seconder? Sorry. Councillor Cat.
Right, well, first of all, I'd like to say to any members of the public who we haven't mentioned that we had a pre-meeting where we discussed a lot of issues. And I asked many questions that were asked me by the residents in Matlock Park at that meeting, which is why I'm not raising many questions now. I have got 2 questions to ask. Secondly, I'd like to say to Councillor Rose, it's quite wrong. I'm not just doing this exercise because of the amount of, and I have had many complaints from the residents of Matlock Park. I'm split down the middle. As a district councillor, I know we've got duties, and I feel for the family, completely feel for the family, that we haven't met their needs, and we haven't met their needs. So it is not my pressing on this issue about Tinter's Yard tonight is not purely based on what the residents of Matlock Park are saying. I truly feel it is not a suitable site for this family. They've been asked in the past to go there. They're frightened silly because it's so isolated. We've been told that they have multiple problems. They have been, as all travellers have been, finding life difficult, and they are in a difficult situation which we are not helping. Now you might say putting them in Tinter's Yard would help, but it's not going to help them because it's so isolated and they're fearful of going there. They might find the coach park a much better bet, but that's all predicated on the fact that getting Tinter's Yard falls through in the first place, not on whether they say or not they want to go there. I was going to ask for this to be deferred, but obviously I can't now because it's been proposed and seconded that we accept the recommendations. My question, and it's the only question I'm going to ask, because we have talked about the rifle range and why we haven't had any conversation with them. The conversation with the rifle range, I think, ought to take place, because I only found out on Sunday morning. Somebody rang me to say that they are still active. They use that rifle range 3 nights a week and on weekends at times, and they have access, rights of access through. That's never been discussed because we didn't know they were there. That's another issue that I find is a bit difficult. But the question I want to ask, before making more comments, is in the report at 3.7, it says that we are going to provide other temporary sites of a dedicated nature. I would like to know what they are, who they are, where they are. Because if it's only going to be, I can't think, it's not Ashbourne, it's not going to be Roseley. There's Bakewell and there's Matlock Bath. Where else? Because if it's just Bakewell and Matlock Bath and this goes, we don't find a permanent site within a year or 2 years, we're going to have them there 6 months of the year. Bakewell have just said they didn't want them there for 6 months of the year. You can have them again if it's just us two that's having them. I want to know which two they are, please. That's before I make another comment.
The Chairman, I can respond to that. The current situation is that we haven't identified any temporary tolerated sites. What we do have is a history of the family moving around different sites, and they tend to frequent the same ones, which does in the past include Bakewell, most recently 2 sites in Ashbourne, and the coach park at Matlock Bath. But the reference in the report is pointing to a situation whereby before March of 2019, the work which the committee have already authorised in terms of the search utilising private surveyor will be concluded. That will give us an idea as to whether there is a more permanent solution possibly out there. It may not be delivered by March 2019, possibly highly unlikely, but we will know and be in a much stronger position as to what the longer term situation is. Now then, once we get to that point, if we haven't identified a permanent site, then the council will potentially be back in the same position we are in now, whereby you will have a duty to tolerate them on temporary tolerated sites until that permanent solution comes. So we may well have this similar debate back in March, but there are no other sites identified at this moment in time.
Councillor Paul, do you want to make your comments now, or do you want to come back on that later on?
I think I might as well just finish making my comments, if that's all right with you, Chair.
No.
It ties it all up then. As I said, I just feel I've given members all the complaints that I've had from people in Matlock Bath. They have been very tolerant and they know what the situation is. You can't get away from it. When travellers arrive, there are difficulties usually. In this family in particular, they've been very tolerant of it. But I just feel if you make it a dedicated site, the people in Matlock Bath will not be happy. The rifle range have told me that they are worried about their licence being rescinded because they have a licence with the Home Office and the police, and if there are people living in proximity when they're firing, they might lose their licence, so that's another problem. I just feel also that the isolated situation of that particular site for that particular family is very difficult. You have a railway line right up alongside where they're going to be living, with the noise and the danger that might present to some of the family. It just is impossible. I was going to ask for deferral. That's not possible. I would have thought twice about whether or not to vote for or against, but now that third paragraph has been added saying that we're going to use the station car park at the coach park, I will be voting against. I'm sorry.
Thank you. Councillor Catt, would you like to come in there?
Thank you, Chair. This is a tragic, in fact it is, and it has been for a considerable length of time. a tragic situation. It's one that all members of the council and officers have been attempting to resolve, not just for weeks nor months, but for years. It's taking much, much longer than any of us would want, and we all know that the only solution is a permanent solution, and until we get that, we will have a series of meetings like this and situations where the settled community and the travelling community come into conflict. I'm utterly convinced that every single one of the members around this table is well aware of the needs of this particular Gypsy family and is sympathetic to those needs and wants to see those needs accommodated. I don't think Tinter's Yard is perfect at all, but I think it is far better than where they are at the current time. I cannot see other than how we can follow the recommendations of our officers, given the changes to the legislation that came into force earlier this year. They have provided us with a presentation of homelessness, which we have to accept. Our duty as a council towards this family, within the context of the report, is, I'm sure, to follow these 3 recommendations, and I will certainly support it, and I hope that other members of the committee will find it in their hearts to do so as well. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Catt. Councillor Finesse.
Oh, thank you. Yes, thank you, Chair. Well, I'm going to support the recommendations simply because I can't see any alternative. You know, it seems we just have to do it. I mean, my ward is right in the north of the county, so I haven't been particularly personally affected by what's been going on. But what I understood from earlier years, and perhaps Paul, you can sort of put me right on this, is that we'd regarded Roseley as the permanent solution at one stage. Maybe I'm wrong on that. But can you tell me what went wrong at Roseley? You know, what was the problem? Did we spend much money on it? Did we, you know, what's happened that sort of went wrong there? I've got another question as well. Do you want to answer that one first?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I don't think we regarded Rosie as a permanent solution, but we did at one time regard it as a temporary tolerated site to the extent we had permission for that granted. And the family were encouraged to move on there and did so. They moved off shortly afterwards. The reasons given were that they were suffering harassment from people unknown whilst on that site.
Okay, thank you for that. My other question is, in one of the representations, there's mention of toilet facilities at the Matlock site. Would they, I mean, what's the responsibility there? Would they use the public toilets? Would we have to provide portable toilets? Or do we expect them to have facilities actually in the vans?
No. Thank you, Chairman. That's probably me again. We talked earlier about the cultural aversion of some gypsies and travellers towards living in bricks and mortar. A similar aversion exists in relation to using sanitary facilities within caravans, which some have considered to be unhygienic, for lack of a better term. You heard earlier about some of the personal circumstances of the family as well. Given those particular circumstances, it's the view of officers that some form of facility should be provided on site that they will be able to use. It's likely that wherever they might be on that area of land, as we've talked about, that some of them wouldn't be able to make it to the public conveniences.
Thank you. Councillor Morley.
Thank you very much indeed, Chair. It's a difficult one. Two questions. One for, well, first one, Rosalie, we just spoke about that they had been threatened. The question there is, have we got a police record of those threats, or is this just anecdotal? Question one. It's completely separate now, and to me much more important. The rifle range, is there an armoury there, and has there a risk assessment been carried out before deciding on this site? Thanks, Chair.
I think, Chair, if I take the first of those, there have been two reported incidents at Roseley. First of all, when they occupied the site at the old station yard car park, which was prepared as a temporary tolerated site. I believe there was a police record in relation to that. That was an incident of throwing stones and abuse and spreading of agricultural muck on the site. More recently, they occupied an unauthorised encampment, not on the same site, but further into the rural area of the village, when they were shot at. And that's a matter of police record, yes.
In regard to the question regarding the armoury, this information has come to us only in the last few hours, really. The site has been visited. It is a secure site. It's clearly a licensed site as well. And in regard to the potential risk to occupiers of this site, clearly in operating that site as a rifle range, they have duties and responsibilities to make sure that everybody is safe, not just people who may be on this site, but other persons as well. So I don't have any further information on the actual setup of the site, other than to say that they clearly would have to comply with their existing rules and regulations, which are clearly licensed.
Thank you.
Can I just make it clear to the members of the public that you can't take part in the meeting? That's purely for members, so I'll just make you aware of that. Thank you. Councillor Ratcliffe.
I've got several questions, Chair, before comment. Has the Gypsy Liaison Officer been made aware of the recommendations that have been put in terms of that? I would consider that is important. That person has always worked across the Derbyshire in many boroughs and districts, and she has been and is known to work with officers of this council. So I'd quite like to know if she has, and what was her comment. Of course, the aspect that my husband sent to the chair, thank you, and the aspect was, have the parish council been notified about this? Have you involved the county council in any way with officers? Because I've got some other comments to make, but I'll have those first and then come up with comments.
Again, Chair, if I take the first question. Yes, the Derbyshire Gypsy Liaison Group have been informed of this proposal. I spoke to their representative on Wednesday of last week. She informed me she'd be speaking to the family on the Thursday. We had hoped that she'd be available to visit the site with our officers this week, and unfortunately she isn't. She's away out of the country. She views the proposal positively, and although she represents the family, she knows that she doesn't necessarily speak exactly for them all the time. Yeah. So she was going to speak to them, and we hope that that's been positive. She regarded the proposition as positive.
Could I
have a second question answered?
Well, I would like a supplementary to that, because the most important thing, have the family been informed, and are they happy with this arrangement?
Thank you, Chair. My colleague on my right here, Simon, will be visiting the site tomorrow with one of the environmental health staff to talk to the family, depending on what the committee decides tonight.
I asked because I contacted the Gypsy liaison officer when she emailed members about the interest, and she said that they were happy to be at Ashbourne in an overspill of the car park. So it doesn't ring true in that way, because the thought is that they definitely need arrangements in the winter. She didn't say anything about the site being poor in any way, and so I find that difficult that we have not been able to provide something, because the one thing that she said was that they wanted to remain in the south part of Derbyshire Dales. I think that's what she said when there was emails. I don't know if it went to everybody, but that was the thing, that the initial approach. So why we can't find something to help the family, because I do believe, and it is only through, let's say, a party, that the family difficult situations have got worse, and they need more so to be near in the south part of Derbyshire Dales. We're the ones with the duty of care for them. I wish that it had been South Derbyshire in a way for them. I think it's, or Staffordshire, because the answer's there. There are things. So when I make my comment after the questions, I will let you know how I feel about it. Very sad.
I'll come back to you for comments later.
Thank you.
Councillor Atkin.
There was, just to finish asking.
I'm happy to answer a bit more, Chair.
Okay, thank you.
Just to fill in for members a little bit on some of those issues. The travelling family have indicated that when a permanent site is developed, they would prefer that to be somewhere in the south of the district to access family support and fulfil their health and welfare support, I suppose, as well. It's true that when they've been established on the site for a period of time, they make links, as we all do when we move somewhere, with health facilities and with adult care, with people to support them. Some of those links travel with them wherever they may go. The adult care support, for example, that they have a single point of contact who travels with them whichever site they're on. They have difficulty on the site they're currently on, mainly in terms of the ground conditions. They reported some incidents with members of the public when they were there earlier, but I believe some of those have disappeared, died away a little bit. They have talked about what we might be able to do to that site if they were to remain on it, some of which is not feasible. And they have talked about moving to another site within the town. It's true that every time we move them, whether we move them from Bakewell, we're moving an unauthorised encounter, whether they go to, or whether we move them from Matlock Bath, or whether we move them from Ashbourne or Doveridge, that they suffer difficulties maintaining their contact. But equally at the same time, we know that the tensions can build with the settler community, as was reported by Councillor Mrs Twigg earlier. So there's a balance to be struck. None of these sites are perfect. If they were, we wouldn't have a problem. We wouldn't be having this meeting. But in the meantime, the family do need housing somewhere. They need housing somewhere that is suitable for them over the winter months.
Thank you. Councillor Atkin.
Thank you, Chair. I think the District Council have got the recommendations right in this report. It's something we have got to do. We've heard from Councillor Strick from Derbyshire County Council. We've also heard from Irene, who was also a member of the County Council. You're not going to hear me specifically about Risley as the County Council for the doing it, but I do think this report does shed some light on what's happening with the new legislation, and I will be supporting the recommendations.
Councillor Burfoot.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I've got a question about paragraphs 3.6 and 3.7. I can't really see what the distinction is between the two. Presumably officers have done a comparative assessment of the two sites, the unofficial one and this one, Meadows, where it's described as having a lack of services. And then 3.7, Tintage Yard, can be provided with facilities and services. So what exactly are these facilities and services? for each one, and why can they be provided one and presumably not at the other?
I think perhaps, Chair, the distinction between the two sites mainly relates to the surfacing. At Fishpond Meadow is covered by a grass grid, and making that suitable for walking on and living on in winter is very difficult without permanently damaging the surface. The site at Sinty's Yard also suffers from water and puddles and so on, but it is a loose filled surface, it's limestone chipping surface, and those puddles and potholes can be filled to make that a better surface for the family to live in. Again, my colleague Simon would tell you that they're fastidious about how their caravans are treated. They know that they're living accommodation, they treat them with great respect, and they want us to treat them with respect when we visit them too. And that's very difficult when you're trailing mud and muck into the caravan every time you go outside, particularly given the circumstances of some of the people on site. Some of the other facilities that might want to be provided, we have provided a toilet unit at Ashbourne, as is seen to be only right for basic human rights and public decency, really. And we've provided some fencing to try and make the site as secure as possible for all members, given that we know that the level of risk is higher to some of those than it might be to you or I.
Chair, just to add to that, I think there's one other factor regarding Fishpond Meadows, in that it is clearly a designated overflow car park for the town of Ashbourne. And the prolonged use of that site for an alternative use will clearly start to deprive Ashbourne of that car parking facility, which will start to have an economic impact on the town, added to the poor ground conditions of that particular site, which can be improved at the Tinter's Yard site.
Thank you. Councillor Murphy.
Thank you, Chair. Well, as you can imagine, being a ward member for Ashbourne, I'm obviously going to support the recommendations. I have every sympathy for all the wards that are going to be affected in the coming months. It's not an ideal situation. I really mean that.
Yes, I'm sure you do.
I do, really.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think we're all in a very...
Can you keep your questions and your comments, please, and not...
Right.
Thank you.
I've heard things said recently that have really truly shocked me, and the people who said them, I thought they would know better. It's a sad situation. There is only one solution, and that's going to be extremely hard to achieve as well. I appreciate that, and that's finding a suitable permanent site. Thank you.
Councillor Master Bloodworth.
Just a quick question. It keeps saying about this firing range of where they're going to be, or shooting range. I mean, you're saying when you're putting them there over the winter months, is the shooting range open during those winter months? And are they still going, or is it closed over the winter months? Because as you said that before, whilst in Rosie, they were shot at. If they've been shot at before, it's obviously not going to be a very good idea to put them near a firing range.
Chairman, I can deal with that. I have no information to suggest that the rifle range would not be in use over the winter months, and my understanding is that that is a club. It's licensed to operate as a rifle range and meets on a fairly regular basis, but I don't think we can necessarily align the incident at Roseley to an increased risk here. Clearly the issue at Roseley was an experience of unlawful activity undertaken by a particular individual, whoever that may be. I've no doubt that the rifle range will operate within the parameters of the law, have all the necessary safeguards in place, and as I said earlier, in regard to any member of the public in close proximity to that facility, the rifle range, the club will have a duty of responsibility to them to make sure that the public are not endangered, be it a traveller family or anybody else.
What I was meaning is the noise. I mean, you know some of them have got the issues they've got, and surely the noise is going to scare them if they've been shot at before. I'm not saying that the people on the rifle range are going to go and shoot at them. I'm saying the noise might scare the travellers and bring back bad memories and just be all round then generally bad for their health.
I don't think anybody could rule out that potential consequence of that site, but as Mr Braun's already said, there's no perfect site in the district, and every site will have a constraint to some degree.
Do you have any further questions before we move to comments? I've got a couple of people that want comments. If there are no further questions, Councillor Ratcliffe.
Well, thank you, Chair. This is a decision that we make. It's come through the officers. I'd like to know how much political recommendations came in this, but I'm not asking that question. In the comment, there are a political direction that all councils go to. And I had faith in this council, with its leadership, both politically and with the officers. At the local plan, when we were in danger of it falling and we wanted a recommendation, I got the consent of appreciating the comments that were made about, I think it was chapter 10 of the Travellers and Gypsy site, that we did work for a permanent site. Because this is why we're in a problem, although it's more so, and it's not the only thing. And so when that was granted by the leader of the council, I have supported that local plan. But I've been waiting and waiting. And at the last meeting we discussed not this family and the duty of care that we have to them, which is really important. It was about how we move forward to do the permanent site. And I don't think the leadership got the support from the members in order to put some money down in which to take things forward at the time. And I was very disappointed. Now I tell you what I did in terms of the meeting at the local plan. The local amnesty group was so appalled at what was happening, not through me, but through the media and people, that we were treating and not coming up to the mark with this family. And I knew, because I've been on this council for a long time, I've been to Darleydale, not the last time, the time before, but before that. And I mentioned before, we had an environmental officer with compassion who used to deal and still does. So I'm wanting, wherever this family needs things now, their situation is getting worse, and they have support from social services. I can't see how you can possibly say that we will go forward with a rifle range for three days a week plus weekends. Your colleague there that's new on the council, she heartens me every time she speaks, because you couldn't, and I wouldn't, Chair, I speak to you. I, as Chair, would not want that. Or if I was a political, I would not be putting that site forward. I'm sorry. I know we're desperate. There's no more desperation than being able to sleep at night thinking that you're all right. So I certainly won't be voting this. I said to the amnesty group, there is no need to turn up to these meetings, because this council will come up to the mark with its duty of care. But you haven't. And I think at times it's not the fault of any individual, but collectively we have to, just like our own government has to all work together to find someone. And if a report comes to this committee about we move forward to buy a site or to instil a toilet, when we know that we've had to close toilets, it's really devastating. I tell you, I will just resign, because I think it's absolutely awful. It's the only thing, the integrity of here. I can't vote for this because it's the wrong site. I have tried to look, Chair, where in my own area, and Dorking is my district council hat, where we could put these people safely in my division. And I hope everybody else has done it, because they can't go on. So, you know, I prefer to defer it and say, come together and we will promise that we will address our local plan for a permanent site alongside looking after this. It's heartbreaking to find that the next generation of this family are reaping the difficulties of the previous generations just for the want of us getting down and tackling the problem. This is pushing it to one side into the long grass again. No way. They're better staying where they are, nearer where their family are, at least until. And I am not a gypsy liaison. I am not the officers that are sitting there. I have to defend myself and what I cannot vote for this at Matlock Pan. And I'm very sorry. I wish I could.
Thank you, Councillor Ratcliffe. Councillor Burfoot.
Thank you, Chair. I must say I have a great deal of sympathy and appreciation for what Councillor Ratcliffe has just said. I'm going to find it very difficult to support this resolution tonight, this recommendation tonight. Purely on a practical basis, actually, and comparing the two sites, I can't understand why it's in our interest to move a family with multiple problems from Ashbourne to Matlock Bath for up to 3 months we're talking about. Because if it's beyond 3 months, I'd have thought, well, obviously Matlock Bath is going to, the car park's going to be much in demand in the spring and summer months. This car park in Ashbourne, and I sympathise with Ashbourne residents who have to put up with this situation now, but looking at the photographs, it looks as if the car park is totally unusable anyway in the foreseeable future, even if it was vacated tomorrow. So it's going to be midsummer probably before any reinforced grass surface, which I've had experience of in the past, will be anything like ready for use as a car park, an overspill car park. So obviously the site in Matlock Bath is well, I've not seen it actually personally, but it doesn't look too good to me. And it, as Councillor Paul has explained, it's subject to various problems, both physical and of its close proximity to, or fairly close proximity to Matlock Bath and a tourist centre, although the site itself is fairly remote. Certainly after hours it's remote, as anyone who's been to Matlock Bath car park at night would testify. So I just can't understand the common sense really of moving a family with so many problems from Ashbourne to Matlock, Ashbourne where they want to be anyway, which is something that needs to be said, to somewhere where they don't necessarily want to be, and where, as has been explained by Councillor Massey Bloodworth, close proximity to a rifle range as well. I mean, I've had dealing with rifle ranges in my past employment several times, in fact, in the north of, far north of Derbyshire, in fact. And they are very vulnerable sites, and usually very remote from any either population or established uses or anything else. So I can't understand, again, I know this information has only sprung to mind in the last few days, but I can't see the common sense, again, of placing a family so close to a use of that kind. Whether it's obviously open, and I know there are very strict guidelines about rifle clubs established by the Home Office and so on. And I can't understand how, in fact, the access appears to go through the proposed site for this family. So again, it's, I think, a vulnerable site in terms of the threat to from rifle club and this extended family. So I'm afraid I can't accept this recommendation tonight. I agree with what Councillor Paul has said about the problems of citing this family in Tinter's Yard in Matlock Bath.
Thank you, Councillor Massey Bloodworth.
I mean, I understand with this we have to put them somewhere that wherever we put them, there's going to be problems. But there's problems with the site, and there is moving vulnerable people who have faced hate and been shot at next to a shooting range.
Two does not make four.
I mean, people that aren't probably not going to agree with me on this. I don't think it's the right thing to do. These poor people have been through so much, and I know we've got a duty of care to help them, and I think this is not the way to do it. Putting them next to a shooting range, it's not going to be fair on them, especially with some of the problems we know that some of them have. And I can see him rolling his eyes at me already. But
Can we keep to the debate, please?
Sorry.
Councillor Morley.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. I wouldn't draw a parallel between somebody letting a shotgun off in a field in the north and a rifle range. It's a bit of a far stretch. I don't think that's an issue. And I think the real problem here, and nobody seems to be willing to grasp it, is not the family themselves, who can't be named, is the fact that when Appleby Fair, I'm sure you all know Appleby Fair, when all the relatives are on the way up to Appleby Fair, Appleby and back again, they tend to stop with relatives around the country. It's not just Derbyshire, it happens in Shropshire, it happens in Lancashire. So what you do get twice a year, before and after Easter, you get other families moving in. Now, I happen to know this family. They were in Doveridge when I first moved there, and there's a lot of goodwill towards them. The local lobby used to go down and fix the gas when they moved in. So it's not the family, it's what goes with the family that is really the issue. And again, this is where I'm concerned about putting them close to a potentially risky, not risky side of that, but I'm just torn between, do we invite the family's relatives to a site which may present risks? I probably will support their recommendation because I think, as we say, it's inevitable and it needs doing for their sake. But I'd like to see some steps taken to make sure that when the relatives do arrive, we do take some protective measures to make sure nothing dreadful happens. Because again, I've been involved with the lawyers for the Gypsy Liaison group before, and believe me, if anything goes wrong, we will be on for years.
Thank you, Councillor Bright.
I think we just need to take into consideration, as we discussed in the pre-meeting, the family don't have to move to this site. This will be their choice. We are simply offering them another alternative. Okay, we're not forcing them. They can go wherever they choose to. Okay, the people at Derbyshire Dales have, quite rightly, actually been very generous over the years in trying to accommodate this family. For all the bad comments we get in Ashbourne, we also have a lot of people who are very accepting of this. But the family, they're free to go where they choose. They're travellers. So we're not forcing them to go there. And as far as with regards to the safety on the range, having been a range officer in my previous life, I completely understand the levels of security that these ranges, if there is an armoury on site, will have to go through. And you would need a lot of serious equipment to either break into a range like that or get into a situation like that as well. So I really have no concerns on that fact, that the family have a choice.
Thank you. I've got no further members wishing to make a comment. Councillor Rose.
Oh, I have a recorded vote, please.
Just that, find a seconder. Record vote, thank you. Councillor Rosewell, Kat, would you like to come back?
Yes, just to sum up, Chairman. And I just want, I think there's been some very carefully considered and well-meaning and very sincere comments. And I think everybody recognises that this is just not an easy situation for the council. It hasn't been, and it's going to continue not to be an easy situation. And I think we all know that. And so I fully respect all the comments that have been made. But I do think this rifle range, with great respect, is getting a little out of hand, in the sense that I went down there this afternoon to have a look for myself, having seen Mrs. Pawley's question, had a good look around the site, and it's a long green building which lies parallel to to part of the car park, because the other part of the car park is up by the council sheds there, and it's all enclosed, so it's not that there's people out there popping away at some sort of distant target on a bank on a hillside. It's not that sort of rifle range, it's all enclosed. Now, I can imagine soundproof to a certain extent in accordance with such regulations, but that must apply for this sort of controlled environment. So I think it's sort of got a bit out of proportion in some members' minds, with great respect, you know, and as Councillor Morley aptly put it, you know, it's totally different to popping a shotgun at somebody at Roseley than it is to sort of getting a rifle out of a rifle range and doing something with it. I mean, it just wouldn't happen. So, you know, as usual, the councillor is between a rock and a hard place, and we have to make a decision, and I commend the officer's recommendations. But we will be returning to this subject in March without doubt.
Thank you. The amended recommendations have been moved and seconded, and we're going to have a recorded vote, please. Jackie?
Councillor Atkin.
For.
Bright.
For.
Bull.
For.
Burfoot.
Against.
Cat.
For.
Elliott.
For.
Finesse.
For.
Hobson.
For.
Massey Bloodworth.
Against.
Morley.
For.
Murphy.
For.
Pawley.
Against.
Ratcliffe.
Against.
Rose.
For.
Statham. And Wild.
For.
12 in favour with 4 against.
Thank you. That's been moved, seconded, and motion's been carried. Thank you very much.